Confidence, that belief in yourself, that inner knowing that you can take on the challenges of life, face the difficulties, and still keep moving forward. Confidence is not always easy to come by. In fact, for most of us, it takes time, effort, and a lot of trial and error to build. It's a process, a journey, and sometimes, without even realizing it, we sabotage ourselves along the way. We make mistakes that slowly chip away at our confidence, often without recognizing it. You see, it's not usually the big events that erode our confidence. No, it's the little things. It's the subtle habits, the quiet choices, and the mental traps we fall into day after day. And these seemingly small missteps can accumulate over time, leaving us feeling uncertain, insecure, and far less capable than we truly are. But here's the good news. These mistakes are fixable, every single one of them. If we can identify them, we can address them, and we can start turning the tide. Over time, I've put together 8 of the most common mistakes people make that can ruin their confidence. These are mistakes I've seen over and over again, whether in my own life, in the lives of people I've worked with, or in stories from countless others. So, as we go through each of these, I want you to keep an open mind. Ask yourself if you might be making one or more of these mistakes, even unconsciously. And remember, awareness is the first step to change. Once we see the problem clearly, we're already halfway toward the solution. Here's mistake number 1, comparing yourself to others. This is probably one of the most common mistakes that I see, and it's so easy to fall into this trap. We look around at the people in our lives, and what do? We start comparing. We measure our lives against theirs, and almost inevitably, we come up short. We say to ourselves, why aren't I as successful as they are? Why don't I have what they have? But here's the thing. You're never seeing the full picture. You're only seeing the surface. And when you compare your inner life, your struggles, your challenges, your insecurities to someone else's outer life, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. You don't see the battles they've fought. You don't know the sacrifices they've made. You don't know what they've gone through to get where they are. All you see is the result, and you're comparing it to your journey, which is still unfolding. Comparison is a confidence killer. It's a thief that sneaks into your mind and robs you of your self-worth. It tells you that you're not enough, that you don't measure up, and that you'll never be as good as someone else. But here's what I've learned. Your journey is unique. Your path is yours alone, and it can't be compared to anyone else's. When you spend your time focusing on what someone else has, you lose sight of what you're building. You lose sight of your own strengths, your own progress, and the things that make you special. One of the best ways to break the habit of comparison is to turn your focus inward. Instead of measuring yourself against others, measure yourself against where you were yesterday. Ask yourself, am I growing? Am I improving? Am I moving in the direction of my goals? If the answer is yes, then you're on the right track, and that's all that matters. Your only competition is yourself. You see, we're all at different stages in life. You might be looking at someone who's been working at their craft for 10 years, and you've only just started. It's not fair to compare their chapter 20 to your chapter 2. You've got your own story to write, and it's going to unfold in its own time. Be patient with yourself. So, here's my challenge to you. The next time you catch yourself comparing your life to someone else's, stop. And remind yourself of this truth. You are on your own journey. Their success doesn't take away from your potential. Their accomplishments don't diminish your value. Focus on your growth, your path, and what you're creating. That's where true confidence comes from. Next, you have to stop seeking approval from others. It's part of human nature. We want to be liked. We want to fit in. We want to be accepted. But when your sense of self-worth is tied to the opinions of others, you're walking on shaky ground. You're giving away your power. And I'm telling you, nothing erodes confidence faster than constantly looking outside yourself for validation. Every time you rely on someone else's opinion to feel good about yourself, you're giving them control over how you feel. If they approve of you, you're on top of the world. But what happens when they don't? What happens when you don't get that pat on the back or the praise you were hoping for? Suddenly, you start to question yourself. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not doing things right. And there it goes. Your confidence takes a hit. You see, the problem with seeking approval is that it's never enough. Even if you get it, it's fleeting. It doesn't last. You might feel great for a moment, but then you're right back to square one, needing that next dose of validation. It becomes a cycle, a dependency, and over time, it chips away at your sense of who you are. Because if your worth is based on what others think, what happens when their opinions change? What happens when the applause stops? You lose your footing. Now, don't get me wrong. Feedback and constructive criticism are valuable. I'm not saying you should ignore the insights of others, but there's a big difference between seeking feedback to grow and seeking approval to feel worthy. And when you're constantly chasing approval, you're not living authentically. You're not being true to yourself. Instead, you're bending and twisting to fit into what you think others want you to be. And that's exhausting. It's a never-ending chase that leads nowhere. One of the most liberating things you can do for your confidence is to stop needing everyone's approval. Not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone is going to agree with you. And that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's normal. You can't please everyone, and you shouldn't try to. What matters is that you're living in alignment with your values, your goals, and your truth. When you do that, you start to build a foundation of confidence that's unshakable because it's not dependent on anyone else. Early in my career, I had a lot of people telling me what I should do, how I should speak, how I should run my business. And for a while, I listened. I tried to follow their advice because I thought, well, they must know better than I do. But you know what happened? I lost my voice. I started to feel disconnected from my own message because I was so focused on trying to please everyone around me. It wasn't until I stopped seeking approval and started trusting myself that things really began to change. That's when my business took off, my confidence grew, and I began to connect with people in a much deeper way. Not because I was trying to get them to like me, but because I was being myself. I was being authentic. So here's the key takeaway. Stop giving others the power to determine your worth. Approval is nice, but it's not necessary. You have to approve of yourself first. You have to be the one who decides that you're good enough, that you're capable, that you're worthy. And when you do that, something amazing happens. you start to attract the right people. The ones who see you for who you truly are, who appreciate you without you having to chase after their approval. Confidence is an inside job. It comes from knowing who you are and being okay with it, regardless of what others think. It comes from standing firm in your own shoes and saying, this is who I am, and that's enough. So the next time you catch yourself seeking approval, stop and ask yourself, why do I need this? What am I trying to prove? And then remind yourself, you don't need anyone's permission to be yourself. You're already enough, just as you are. Next, stop talking bad about yourself. We all have that voice in our heads. Some people call it the inner critic. Others might just call it their thoughts. But here's the truth. That voice, if left unchecked, can be one of the most damaging things to your confidence. The way you talk to yourself, the words you use, and the thoughts you entertain have a massive impact on how you feel about yourself. How often do you catch yourself saying things like, I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. Or, why can't I ever get it right? Maybe you don't say them out loud, but if those thoughts are running through your mind, they're quietly eroding your self-esteem. And over time, these small, seemingly harmless phrases start to shape your identity. You start to believe them. You see, the mind is a powerful thing. It believes what you tell it. If you feed it negative thoughts, it will start to look for evidence to back them up. It's like programming a computer. You input negative data and you get negative output. But here's the good news. You can reprogram it. You can change the script. But first, you have to be aware of what you're telling yourself on a daily basis. Because it's happening in the privacy of your own mind, you might think it's not that big of a deal. But make no mistake, it is. That internal dialogue is shaping your confidence, for better or for worse. Now, one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that if they're hard on themselves, it will somehow motivate them to do better. They think, if I criticize myself enough, I'll push myself to improve. But that couldn't be further from the truth. All that negative self-talk does is beat you down. It makes you feel smaller, weaker, and less capable. And over time, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You start to live out the very things you've been telling yourself. Ask yourself, would you ever speak to a friend the way you speak to yourself? Would you ever look at someone you care about and say, you're such a failure. You'll never get it right? Of course not. So why do we think it's okay to speak to ourselves that way? If anything, we need to be kinder, more supportive, and more encouraging to ourselves than anyone else. Because at the end of the day, you're with yourself 24 hours a day. If you're not on your own side, who will be? Here's a simple exercise to help shift that negative self-talk. The next time you catch yourself saying something negative about yourself, stop and ask, is this really true? Is this fact? Or is it just a thought? Often you'll find that it's just a thought, a fleeting moment of doubt, not a hard fact about who you are. And then replace that thought with something more positive, or at least neutral. For example, instead of saying, I always mess up, you could say, sometimes things don't go as planned, but I'm learning and getting better every day. It might feel strange at first, but the more you practice this, the more you'll start to change the way you talk to yourself. And when you change the way you talk to yourself, you change the way you feel about yourself. When you believe in yourself, your actions follow suit. So, my challenge to you is this. Pay attention to your inner dialogue. Start catching those negative thoughts as soon as they arise and consciously replace them with something better. It doesn't have to be overly positive or unrealistic, just something that builds you up rather than tears you down. Confidence begins in the mind, and the words you choose can either lift you higher or drag you lower. Choose wisely. Next, the fear of failure. This may be the worst mistake, the fear of failure. It's something that every one of us has experienced at some point. It's that little voice in your head that says, what if I try and it doesn't work? What if I fail? What if I make a fool of myself? And so, what do? We hold back. We don't give it our all. We play it safe and we stick to what's comfortable. And while we might avoid the sting of failure in the short term, we also miss out on the growth, the learning, and the opportunities that come from stepping outside of our comfort zones. Here's what I've learned. The fear of failure is one of the biggest confidence killers because it paralyzes you. It keeps you stuck. It makes you second guess yourself before you even start. And over time, if you give into that fear, you start to believe that you're not capable. You start to shrink your vision, lower your goals, and settle for less than you're capable of. And that does a number on your confidence because deep down, you know you're not living up to your potential. The problem with fearing failure is that it makes you focus on the wrong thing. You see, failure isn't the enemy. In fact, failure is a part of the process. It's something we all go through on the way to success. But when you're afraid of failing, you start to see failure as a reflection of your worth. You start to think, if I fail, that means I'm not good enough. But I'm telling you, failure doesn't define you. It's what you do after the failure that matters. It's how you pick yourself up, learn from the experience, and keep moving forward. Here's the thing about failure. It's not permanent. It's just a moment in time. But if you let the fear of failure keep you from trying, that missed opportunity can be permanent. And missed opportunities chip away at your confidence far more than failure ever could. When you look back and think, I could have done that, but I didn't because I was afraid, that's when regret starts to set in. And regret is far worse than failure because it's something you carry with you. But when you try, even if you fail, you know you gave it your best shot. You know you stepped up to the plate. And that alone builds confidence. Now, here's a shift I want you to make when it comes to failure. Instead of asking, what if I fail? Start asking, what if I succeed? You see, the mind will always try to protect you from perceived danger. And failure feels like a threat to the mind. But what if instead of focusing on the worst case scenario, you start focusing on the best case scenario? What if things go right? What if this attempt leads to your next big breakthrough? Shifting your focus in this way opens up new possibilities and allows you to move forward with courage rather than hesitation. One of my mentors once told me, you've got to fail your way to success. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant, but now I do. He wasn't telling me to go out and purposely fail, but rather to embrace failure as part of the process. You can't succeed without it. And every failure brings you one step closer to where you want to be. The problem is, too many people are so afraid of the discomfort of failure that they never even start. But here's the truth. The discomfort of failure is temporary, but the rewards of persistence are long-lasting. So how do you overcome the fear of failure? By taking action. That's right. Action is the antidote to fear. The more you do, the more you try, the less power fear has over you. You realize that even when things don't go as planned, it's not the end of the world. You're still standing, you're still learning, and you're still growing. And that builds confidence. Confidence doesn't come from never failing. It comes from knowing that even when you fail, you have the ability to get back up and try again. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you feel that fear of failure creeping in, remember this: failure is not the enemy. Fear is. Don't let fear hold you back from going after what you want. Take action. Embrace the lessons in failure. And know that every time you do, you're building a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. That's where true confidence comes from. Not from avoiding failure, but from knowing you can handle it when it comes.
Click here for part 2.